Hi, good afternoon, Ross, and thank you for joining me on another episode of my podcast, Inspiring Courage. It's lovely to have you here.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. Hello.
Hi there, not at all. So, you are a GP trainee at the moment and the creator of Medizone. We have been introduced by a mutual friend, and we had a conversation, and we have kind of traveled a similar path, haven't we? And you are still kind of on the path of getting your GP trainee sorted so that you can become a GP. Do you know when that will be?
Absolutely. It will be August 2022. So I'm a GPST1 just
Okay,
now.
cool.
It
Uh,
feels like a long way off just now, but I'm sure it will go like that.
I'm sure it'll go quickly. And the reason we kind of connected was because you have had a beautiful journey, haven't you, into your medicine career so far, and you kind of took a little break, and that's
hmm
when we were put in touch together, and we had a little conversation, and I thought you'd be an amazing guest for this podcast because you're slightly different to the guests that I usually have, because you have fallen back in love with what you were doing and you took a little career break from. So that's what my interest was in, having a conversation with you. Would you mind
Uh-huh.
taking us through your journey a little bit, please?
Yes, certainly. Yes, I guess journey is a good expression for it, and I love the use of metaphors and imagery in terms of what I try and how I present life and a career in medicine uh, to students and to other doctors. It really is a journey, and I remember something that really resonated with me when I was struggling quite a bit with where my path was going with medicine. And it was when I was locuming up in the Highlands of Scotland and was going on a run. I was running through this woodland trail. I was going flat out sprinting. And towards the end of it, I realized that I'd been stung by lots of nettles, and I hadn't seen any of those nettles on my run. And I looked down and I said, "Oh, this is really painful." And it felt even more painful because I didn't know where I'd, received those things, and it all just came over me. And then I realized that actually my whole career in medicine had been like that I've been going full pelt without ever really considering any of the pain that I was receiving at any point. And there were two distinct points in my career that were huge nettle stings that really came about because I wasn't considering how I could face those nettles. I knew they were there. I knew I was that they were coming, and I didn't do anything to slow my pace down, perhaps tend to the nettle stings as they were coming. I just had that attitude of just keep swimming, just keep going no matter what, at this relentless pace, because that's what you're taught, and because that's what you see when you're in the thick of a training program. And really, it's it's a shame because you go on this conveyor belt really from your secondary school all the way through university, all the way to your foundation years, and then suddenly at the end of FY2, you're spat out at the end, kind of this fully formed doctor, uh, with an expectation you should immediately go on into training. And I found that incredibly challenging, that first move from FY2 into this sudden expectation that I should know exactly what I wanted to do. And I floundered. So I moved to doing a clinical teaching fellowship because I'd done lecturing with a company for a while, and I'd created an iBook on cardiology for finals. And that attracted the attention of the director of medical education at Edinburgh. So he gave me this job because I'd not even considered doing interviews at the time of FY2. I was just trying to get through my foundation years. And I enjoyed that clinical teaching fellowship. But then again, towards the end of that year, I was faced with uh, just this real difficulty of considering, right, what's my career going to be? What am I going to be for the next 30 years? And that's really the question that I thought I had to answer in that 2 week period where interviews were opening up. And so last minute, I decided to do core medical training. And whilst I was hugely excited about that opportunity to be a core medical trainee at the start. The amount of hours I was having to work, the long commutes I was having to do to get to work, the the missed opportunities to continue building friendships and relationships was really taking its toll. And that first nettle sting really was Christmas Eve night shift 2016, where I had to um, attempt to resuscitate a young gentleman that had committed suicide on a psychiatric ward, and it wasn't successful. And actually, I was thinking about it today, and I've always told people that I think it was it it resonated with me because it upset me because one of my friends had committed suicide a few years before that. But actually, I think what upset me more than anything really was my complete sort of state of apathy about the whole situation. It kind of happened, and then I went on to talk to the police because it was unexpected, and then I just went about my job. And I think it was the realization that I wasn't more affected by this than I should be on a more sort of human, emotional level. I was just hugely apathetic towards the whole experience. But something sort of just switched off. That flicker candle flame just went out at that point, and I was unable to be compassionate from that moment on. To for the next couple of months, I was just dragging myself into work, and uh, I had my final portfolio review, but with my educational supervisor, and he'd seen this glowing portfolio review. I'd been very active, keeping it up to date up until Christmas Eve, and then there was nothing because I was just trying to get through the job, and I kind of broke down. I told him I just didn't have it in me anymore. I felt a lot of shame, and he was really surprised. He thought, you could have come to me. I wish you had said something sooner. Why didn't you? And he said, right, we can still make this work. Your CMT2's just over the hill. It's just one more year. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't have it in me even to consider core medical training year 2. And actually my salvation was working another night shift with a registrar, a locum registrar. And he just simply asked me, why don't you just resign? And suddenly there was just someone had taken a huge weight off my shoulder, that actually I did have a choice in the matter. Who am I trying to do this for? And as soon as I did that, my life just completely turned around. I went to Canada and I traveled, and I went to New York and spent time with my best friend. I then went to locum in Glasgow, and I was able to control how I was working and when I was working. So I decided, no, I want to do Monday to Friday, 8 till 5, no weekends, no nights. And that allowed me to find my girlfriend, now fiance. It allowed me to connect back with my friends. It allowed me to be compassionate to myself, realize that actually I'm a really good doctor. And that's then when I moved to New Zealand. I had a wonderful time in New Zealand. Ironically, as a medical registrar, which was the very thing that I'd jumped off the conveyor belt not to be. But actually, in New Zealand, there's still room to be a human amongst that all. Which was then my second nettle sting, was actually in New Zealand. And that was having had a wonderful time, then coming back for 3 weeks for Christmas. And in those 3 weeks, a good friend's father died, who was a second dad to me growing up. And I had to go to their funeral, and that was very difficult. I had only a short time to see my girlfriend at that time. She was working in New York. I was working in New Zealand, so very long distance. And I had a close relative who'd been unwell, who again I had only had a short time to be with before I got on the plane back to New Zealand. And so that second chapter of New Zealand, I was in New Zealand for a total of a year, and the final 5 months were that second chapter after coming back from those 3 weeks. I couldn't understand why I just felt so tired and so deflated and almost exactly how I did in that CMT1 job. But this time I was on beautiful beaches in some of the, the most beautiful scenery I'd ever been in. And I felt so, this shouldn't be this way. I'm still surrounded by friends. Just keep going, keep going. And that was the second time I resigned after being in a neurology registrar job, which was very challenging, kind of given a lot of responsibilities that were completely beyond my level of capability. And coming back to the UK before my time was up, thinking that I'd had it all stuffed out was kind of quite a shake-up to my existence. And so led me to that run, going up in the Highlands, having that revelation that actually I was just being hugely unfair on myself. And I think we all like to live our lives thinking that we've always, we've suddenly sussed everything out, that but sometimes the rug's always going to be pulled from under our feet and it will test us. And I don't regret any of those experiences, no matter how painful it was at the time and how isolated I felt at times and alien I felt to any of my friends. Now it's given me the sort of spark that I need to feel hugely appreciative of the sort of strength that I've grown from that. And now I really feel it's my duty to kind of share that with others and hopefully mean that they don't feel the nettle stings as badly as I ever did, and help people kind of step back a little and see where their path is going.
I love that metaphor. It's gorgeous. It's something that I actually haven't heard before. So I'm going to nick that one from you because it is true. It is true. I am going to think about you every time I use it. So I think it is about having that awareness, first of all, isn't it? This is what comes up in most of the chats that I have. It's until you have that awareness that you have to be more compassionate towards yourself. You have to be kinder. And we always think that others have it better. Others know their path. Others are so good at choosing their next step. Why can't I be like that? Or they seem a lot happier. And it's, you spoke about so many things, and I just want to touch upon lots of them. The second locum guy that you were working with, and he said to you, why don't you resign? It was like, almost sometimes we live such a disassociated life that we don't feel that we live in our bodies. We don't actually feel like we're experiencing any of what's going on. And it takes for somebody to just say something and you think, goodness me, that makes perfect sense. Why don't I do that? So he was one of those, the catalysts that was sent your way. He was one of those kind of, I call them guardian angels. He was sent your way to just deliver a little message for you to have that huge aha moment. That's the moment you realize there's actually choicefulness. You can choose to be what you want to be and to be who you want to be. And then you chose to take that time off and go and travel. And then when you travel, obviously you have time to reflect. And that's something else we were talking about earlier, that, it's like Groundhog Day at the moment, isn't it? Because, currently, as we are recording this podcast, we are going through a total lockdown again, second time round. And whilst it is like Groundhog Day and it can be quite challenging for us, but let's look at the positive that is given us. Let's look at the time that we have to reflect on our lives and see where we have been, where we are, and where we'd like to be, especially with the turn of a new year. You know, we're going into the new year again, as we're recording. It's New Year's Eve today, isn't it? As we're
Yes.
recording this. So we
Uh-huh.
kind of, it's really lovely time to reflect. How often do we really give ourselves permission to stop and think, okay, fine, I am on a path that once upon a time I thought was my path. Is this still my path? You know, I have come this far, and as you rightly said, you don't regret anything because you are the person that you are today because of all that's happened to you in the past. However, do you think, so I just had a question when you said you went to your appraiser and he said to you, why didn't you come to me earlier, you know, after you were having your second review, and they could see after that Christmas Eve event, they could see that you hadn't been as productive as you had in the past. Do you think that this is something that should have been noticed by your supervisors? Do you think that had they noticed something, had they kind of, extended some kind of mentorship to you, would that have stopped you from reaching the low that you hit? Or the other side of the coin is we kind of need to experience what we experience, and perhaps you hitting that low, and I think it is burnout really you struggled with it, you suffered from burnout, didn't you?
Yeah.
Everything that you're talking about is kind
Yep.
of pointing to that. Do you think you kind of needed that burnout moment so that you could stop? That's our body,
Yeah.
our body's way of saying stop and just think. You know, having been there twice in my 25-year career, I can put my hand up and say that everything you said resonated, that you just push through, you don't feel the pain. Everybody around you, for me, people around me saw what was happening and they tried to warn me, and I still didn't kind of, this perfectionist high achieving, I've got to keep going, I can't stop. So do you think that having this awareness now, if we were to reach that stage, hopefully, if there was somebody around us to telling us, please take a breather and have a think about it, we'd be more inclined to do that perhaps. So I don't know, going forward for the other medical students, I don't know whether that, there's something that you can recommend so that they don't get to the stage that you did. Are there any particular mentorship programs that they could join, or what's the level of support out there for them so that they don't hit what you hit?
Yeah, I think unfortunately there's still severe lack of support, and I think a lot of the reason for that with my particular training is that medical consultants are often up against it as well, and they're struggling to find their own compassion for themselves. So everyone's in this sort of state of low level burnout that they can only really see their views very short sighted. And I certainly think if my consultant, a supervisor, had said, let's meet up for a coffee every, Monday, every first Monday of the month or something like that, and it was just a chance just to be open and to just talk about any doubts I had, that things wouldn't have got to that point. I think it's tricky now. I felt for me that did have to happen, but maybe not to the degree it did.
Yeah, I agree.
And
It's the
yeah,
degree in which it happens then, for us.
because ultimately it was there were mistakes I was making, near mistakes, near misses, units that weren't prescribed correctly, and this is where the real dangers can happen. And I had horrible night shifts where I'd finish at 10 in the morning, but often I'd be asked to stay on a ward round until 11, half 11 in the morning. And then I'd have to drive for 50 minutes on the motorway back to my house. And there'd be sometimes I'd get to my bed and think, I don't remember any of that drive, and just how dangerous that was. And there's been such horrible stories about doctors that have lost their lives on returning from night shifts, and the dropout rates this year have been pretty atrocious from foundation doctors. I think because that level of isolation is even more palpable, and possibly because consultants are of an older, more high-risk group, that they're really just seeing it, they're in it for themselves now. They've got even less compassion to bring to the fore for their trainees. I guess this is a slight chance to plug Medizom, in that
Yes.
I hope that is a space, at least for some of my peers, to feel that they can come to, which is this online area which allows you to kind of open up your viewpoint to other doctors like yourself, and like other doctors that have either deviated away from medicine or have found out of training programs that have given them the fuel that they needed to come back in at a later stage.
It's given a
To
community. I love it. I've looked at your
yeah,
website and I love it. And I love the name because it's short for medical zombies, isn't it? Medizom. That's what
yes,
it's short for. And I loved how you reached that. It's given them a community, a safe space to actually speak about their shared experiences, isn't it? Because when you do
yeah,
start sharing experiences, you don't think you're alone in feeling them. Because a lot of the
yeah.
struggles, again, from my point of view, when I was working as a healthcare professional, it was like, when you don't actually share your struggles with everybody else, you don't know that they're struggling with the same thing also. It's only
Hmm.
when you kind of open up, and that's what you're wishing almost, that your consultant would have taken you to coffee so that you could have opened up in a safe,
Yeah.
informal space. And I've told you the story of me forgetting where the elbow was, haven't I? And night
Yes. Yeah.
shifts are brutal. Sometimes they're awful.
Hmm.
We used to work 24-hour shifts, and one morning I finally got to bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, having worked 9 o'clock the morning before, and I was called to go to ED and x-ray an elbow, and I couldn't think for the life of me where the elbow was in the body. Literally
Hmm.
couldn't, because it would have probably
That's
been
amazing.
the second or third night of me working in a row. And I was like, where on earth is the elbow? I have no idea where the elbow is. How am I going to x-ray it when I get back to the department? I had to actually go, for those who are familiar
Yeah.
with Kitty Clark, open Kitty Clark way before Mr. Google was here with us, Google search anything, to actually find out where the elbow was so I could actually go x-ray. So your mind sometimes isn't as productive as it ought to be after a
Yeah.
long period of working, and lack of sleep is the best form of torture, isn't it?
It is. It feels horrendous, doesn't it?
Yeah, any
I think,
new mother would tell you that.
yeah. But I don't know, maybe you'll have a better kind of perspective of this than I do. But my experience with my career has also been difficult. Being a medic zombie is also encouraged by our kind of love for technology. And that's the thing that I sort of try and encourage medical students in particular to think about, that you can't learn medicine from an app on your phone, that you have to be seeing the human being in front of you. And I think inappropriately, a lot of times I've tried to seek comfort with Facebook or social media to feel part of a community, and times where I could really have actually strengthened myself, my emotional intelligence more, has been restricted by distraction with the phone. Doing CPR on a patient and then immediately removing any sort of helpful or healthy thought processes of beginning to deal with that by just switching off and
Yeah. That's your numbing. That's
putting you
numbing,
to
though,
bed.
isn't it? That's kind of your
Hmm.
numbing strategy, isn't it? Distracting,
But
numbing. That's what we do. I'm far too
yeah,
old, Ross. When I learned to be a radiographer, there was no Google, so
but
we
yeah.
had to
So I
literally
wonder,
go to the
perhaps
library.
if
I don't know. I have
yeah,
no idea, because
perhaps
I've
it would
not
have been
learned
useful.
my profession on an app. So that's a very different.
Yeah,
That's a very different thing again. Maybe with apps,
but I
you know.
wonder if burnout's more readily happens now because there isn't that, when you trained as a trainee, there wouldn't have been that, maybe different
I don't know.
temptations to
Different,
take you
yeah.
away. But yeah.
Yeah, but the definite lack of human contact would be something that is more noticeable now, I suspect, with people
Yeah,
withdrawing and going into their apps. They don't have
yeah,
that human contact that we once did have.
yeah.
So what is your hope with Medizone? What are you hoping that you are going to do? Are you building that community that we talked about? Is that your main purpose and kind
Yeah,
of?
slowly but surely. I mean, I guess also with breakdowns becoming breakthroughs, and so on, I think part of the trouble I've noticed in the past is trying to spin too many plates and say yes to too many things. And um, knowing that for me at the moment, me enjoying GP training is by, keeping a level head and still keeping that as my ultimate prerogative to finish my GP training, whilst at the same time learning Swedish, because my plan is to move to Sweden for my Swedish fiance and leaving Brexit behind. So Medizom is kind of a hobby at the moment. It's also a passion, but it's something that, if I have free time rather than binge watching TV, I just go on to Medizom and do a page at a time, because it's a huge task that I've set myself, because particularly for the medical student pages, I've created Medizom University Hospital, which has all the wards and the core patients where you learn all your core diseases from patients that have names and they have diseases and drugs that interact. And so it kind of helps to bring everything together. But to do that is, it's also refreshing my knowledge and trying to consider it from the knowledge basis of a medical student and not as someone that's been qualified for nearly 10 years. So yeah, I think if I try and imagine what it is going to end up being, I'll probably curl up in a ball and roll back and forth in a corner, because whereas if I see it as just a lovely work in progress and a chance to meet people like yourself and talk about my passions, and just loving what organically it's growing into. And our mutual friend that got us in touch with each other had opened doors for me speaking to other people with similar passions. And that's what I'm loving more than anything. It's not something that's financially um, opening doors at the moment, but I think if that was the case, I think I would start to stress about it more. And I'm just enjoying giving value back at this moment. And if there is financial rewards for it in the future, great. And I think
So bad.
half the trouble, and I think we spoke about this last time, is this kind of shame that we have, that we need to be humble and modest, and we're doctors and we're just here for our patients. But in order to really be there for our patients, it has to be from tending to ourselves first, and sometimes that is finding side hustles so that we can maybe reduce the amount of time we're working, but actually give so much more in that case.
Yeah. The work starts with you, definitely.
Yeah,
If you want to be resourceful to the people around you, the work starts with you. You need to be happy in yourself so that you can
yeah.
inspire others. I've loved our chat. If you wanted to leave us with one nugget of wisdom, what would that be?
I guess it's just not jumping to too many conclusions at once and seeing every situation as neither good nor bad. See it out to its end point. I thought I'd had it sussed out and that I was going to be a locum forever, but actually coming into a training program where I'm valued, I found my people, I feel, and I could have seen so many situations as only bad, but actually they're character building and just part of the wonderful spice of life where it's just unfolding. And one quote that really sticks with me, which was from George Bernard Shaw, which I read in my book Grit, which is a really good book I would recommend. And it says, "The joy in life is to be a force of fortune, rather than a feverish, anxious little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world is not devoting itself to making you happy." So it's the sense that, the world isn't there to make you happy.
No.
You can't just go about this life, being self, just filled with self-pity. Uh, I think it's perhaps something that's learnt from being a child, and you feel that if you throw your toys out the cot and make enough of a fuss, to your parents will eventually do something about it and help you. Unfortunately, as an adult, doing that kind of behavior unfortunately doesn't often get you anywhere.
Mhm.
And really, you have to make those first steps. Sometimes that's counseling, sometimes that's CBT, and not being ashamed to ask for that help. Um, yeah, we just need to be more compassionate to ourselves.
It's beautiful. It's a mindset thing. It's about continual personal development. So not only professional development, but personal development, how you can be a better version of yourself. And you're right in what you said. It's that choicefulness that we were talking about earlier, that situations outside of us or inside of us, internal kind of conflicts that we have, they happen, and they're neither good nor bad. They just are what they are, and how we respond to them is our choice. And of course, every choice has a consequence. So you think about what you want and then respond in a way that you're going to get what you want. So don't be reactive in the way you choose your responses. Be
Yeah,
very mindful of how you're hurting yourself and others alongside. If you were to react in the moment and throw your toys out of the pram, it's not really
yeah,
resourceful, is it, if we do that?
yeah,
But again,
yeah.
that comes with self-awareness, and that comes with understanding that nobody owes you anything. Whatever you want to gain in life is your choice and your choice only, and it's in your power.
Hmm.
And we all have all the necessary ingredients inside of us to get everything that we want. It's just how we choose to use those ingredients that makes the
Yeah.
difference between those who have the fulfilled lives that they want, or those who moan and groan constantly and
Hmm.
are victims of the circumstances. So
Yeah.
thank you for being my guest, and I wish you
Very
every
welcome.
luck, and we will be
Thank
keeping
you.
in touch.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Take care and happy
All the
new year
best.
to you.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Bye.